All right, welcome back, everybody. I hope you had a nice cup of coffee, maybe some chips and salsa, and you're ready to go. Let's give a nice warm welcome here for Dinesh Sonawane and Don Rudish from Workday. We got a very timely topic for you here, why we built our own cost governance tool. This is great. I think it was just today the Tools and Services Working Group published a paper on building versus buying. So we're right on a timely topic here. Thank you guys so much. Let's kick it off.
Yeah, thank
you. Thank you.
Well, Dinesh, let me take a step back. And since I have the audience here, I'm going to ask, we built out this new cost governance tool for Workday, helped save millions of dollars. Am I and my team going to get a bonus after this?
Don, in front of all of these people? Seriously?
That's the point.
If you deliver on the roadmap that you promised, I'll take you and your team to a fancy restaurant. How about that?
Fancy restaurant? That sounds good. Let's see how fancy you can get. So we built out the tool, but what were you using before we built out this new platform?
Yeah, so Don, our needs earlier on were very simple. So we used to use the CSP's native billing consoles. And as our engineers started to use cloud, we became multi-cloud. We had to do something. So we implemented a third-party package software. And it served its purpose up until a particular point in time. And as our engineers became really cloud first, we had to do something different. So we had to take the difficult decision, the hard decision to build our own tool. And we're still enhancing it. It's a journey that's continuing to grow as we make progress. So this is where we are now. And you know why we had to build our tool? So, the cost is kind of third package software or a billing console. You get the cost per instance or cost per this EBS volume. But we wanted to bring in the business context to that data, right? So, when you say unit metrics, is always denominator, which is the enterprise data. So when you say cost per customer, the customer and the tenant data is in our own data warehouses. So how do you blend that? Do you bring that data into the third-party package software? Or if you run that dev test, how much did that particular test cost us? That test information isn't with us in enterprise. How do I blend that with the third-party package software, which has just got the numerator? Not only that, for us, public cloud is material. It impacts our EPS. And our finance colleagues used to always ask us, what is the variance? Why do you have such a high variance between your forecast and your actuals? And you know how people used to analyze that?
How?
The best software tool out there, spreadsheets. Not one, not two, a plethora of spreadsheets. So we had to do something different. So we built a planning module inside of our cost governance tool. And the last quarter that we closed, as you know, Don, our forecast accuracy was 99.5%, just 0.5% variance.
That's impressive. 0.5% forecast variance. Especially considering, I remember back in a time when forecast managers would come up to us a bit puzzled, saying that, my spending actuals are dramatically shifting from month to month, even though my resource usage remained pretty much static. So what did we do to help out these forecast managers?
And they were so right. I mean, for the same identical usage, period over period, week over week, the cost dollar could change because the way the commit-based instruments, RI, savings plans, cards are applied, you could have dramatic shifts in your costs. So what we did is we implemented something very unique, which is we implemented standard cost. The clicker is acting on its own. So we got, at the start of the year, the unit price for every SKU that we use is fixed. It doesn't change throughout the year. So only thing that can change your cost is by the type of instances you use. Instead of Intel instances, using AMD instances or ARM architecture-based processors, or how long do you use and do you shut down. So that is what made our life easy, and all of these allocations and everything becomes very easy.
Nice. So it makes a lot of sense to have these teams really focus on standard costs. That way they don't get bogged down by worrying about these variables like savings plans, reserve instances, and they can really just focus on the key drivers of costs, which is resource usage. But I guess what that means is if we're building out this new tool, right, we need to have, we need to keep these CSP discounts under wraps and just restrict that to the core FinOps team.
Totally. And as a result, not only what data, but the way the data is presented, right? The leaders want high-level summaries. Engineers want detail. You don't want a clutter of 30 different filters on the top, and then you don't know which filters to click. We need persona-based dashboards. So all of these were limitations that we were observing in the third-party packaged software. Nothing against that software. It served its purpose. But it had all these inherent limitations. How do I bring in my own data?
Yeah, I guess the benefit of building out your own tool is our ability to customize it. So we'll be able to integrate into our service registry so that we can get contact details for account owners and send out automatic alerts via Slack or email when certain thresholds are being reached. We can even normalize on cross CSP service definitions across multiple different providers.
Totally. And all of this is fine, right? I mean, the what, all of this gives you the answers, the what questions. What is my spend for an account or a GCP project or for this instance? All this what is table stake. What is really required is what can I do about it? The engineers are interested in what actions can I take to reduce cost or optimize and add value to the company. And this theme, as you know, through the foundation survey, is common across not only Workday, but the entire community. How do we reduce waste? How do we get forecast accuracy? We believe we did the tooling to help us get there by creating our own tool called Optimize, Platform, Usage, and Spend. So without further ado, we just want to show you some dashboards, images. We can't record an actual video, so we got some GIFs to show you. Over to you, Don.
Okay, thank you. So here we have the Opus landing page. Here we created a tile for every FinOps subject area where there's a set of links so that when a user clicks on one of those links, they're redirected to a dashboard that already has the filters pre-populated for them for that context. On the next slide, I'm going to demo two of the views that are available to users. So here we have our usage summary tab where users can see spend across products and services, and then our waste elimination tab where users can take action items on cost savings opportunities. There are two additional tabs here that we are unable to show you right now, but it's our forecast accuracy where users can see the trends of their forecast accuracy over time, as well as the budget flux to compare their spending actuals against budget. But there are two additional features that we'll be able to demo on the next slide. So on this dashboard, we have a dashboard that is defaulted to the weekly view, but we can change that to the day view and then also filter on, let's say, Saturday and Sunday in order for us to see maybe our resource usage on the weekends on a development environment, for example. With that, I'll pass things back to Dinesh and we'll go over more features.
Thank you, Don. So what you see here is Kubernetes implementation. On the x-axis, you have all the different Workday services that make up Workday application. And on the y-axis, you have the utilization of the service against the requests and the limits that they have scheduled for Kubernetes to provide. So below the line, let's say 66% is good enough utilization. You can see all the services who have requested more resources, be it CPU or memory. This chart is showing memory, but we have also CPUs. And that is dollarized so that the individual service owners get a view of how much opportunity do they have to save cost. You can always drill to detail. This is standard feature of almost all BI tools. So let's say I'm drilling down the product hierarchy. Now, focus project gets us maybe the crawl phase. We are multi-cloud. What let's say AWS calls as a memory optimized instance, Google calls as a general purpose instance, for example. We want to know how many engineers are using AMD or ARM-based processors because they are typically cheaper than the Intel-based processor. So we had to conform multi-cloud into this product dimension so that the engineers can see, for example, a spend for ML, how much is that on Intel processor versus AMD versus GPU, irrespective of the CSP that is rented on, right? As of now, if I have a packaged software, I have to go to one dashboard, which is AWS only or GCP only. So this all kind of brings it home. This is our secret sauce. So we have a metadata, which is a religion. Our team maintains that every Friday. Any change to the account owner, the cost center, who is paying for it, who is going to do the DevOps and optimize is maintained religiously, really religiously. This is what it makes happen. So a little bit about Workday. We are a Fortune 500 company. As our founder, CEO, to quote him, we help customers transform how they manage their two most important assets, their people and their money. We tens and thousands of Fortune 500 companies, extremely high customer sat, 95% plus. We process 3 billion plus transactions per day. Basically, we are a software company. And you saw my first slide, we took a long time to build our own cost governance tool. So why did we take that much of time? We had to get certain basics, foundational aspects under control, and then go into tooling. Tooling comes last. For us, it is people first, processes, and the tools last. So we learned from all using this packaged software and, let's say, tool for optimizing Kubernetes cost, and we pulled a proposal for our product and technology leadership team to get the funding to have the right talent, and not only the FinOps talent, but the engineering talent to build this. And then we focused on all the processes and policies and compliance and governance aspect to make that happen. So let's go through each one of them a bit. At the highest level, we have this accountability metrics. We have a hub and spoke model. At the center is our CCOE and the FinOps team. And we have grouped what Don showed you was our landing page, was a way to declutter when you are looking for your subject area. You don't want to filter. If you just click that, you go there. Likewise, all the subject area owners has a FinOps counterpart and a DevOps counterpart so that they can be held accountable for the optimizations. It's like that Spider-Man meme doesn't happen. Who is responsible, right? It is all avoided through this. This is our superpower that I mentioned about, almost like a religion. Our approach is many small accounts rather than one large account because of our security and policy approach. That means we don't need to necessarily tag because this metadata helps us understand where the spend is, which cost center, so that our external segment reporting, whether it is R&D or sales and marketing or COGS, is very clear. We don't have any pollution inside an account that you have R&D workloads sitting there, as well as sales demo workloads or your prod workloads. No, that's just a no-no. Every account or a GCP project has a platform owner. Not only the current active, but the forecast, because we are so strong on our planning accuracy, which is our number one KPI. We have, when we do our long-range plan, we add to that list of the future accounts and GCP projects that we're going to open up. And we submit the forecasts and the plans to that. And of course, the hierarchy, if you have thousands of accounts, you don't want to look at the trenches view. We want the forest view. So let's say we want to measure our spend across ML. And ML might have, let's say, 50 different projects. One is for your training, one is for your deployment, for this segment or whatever. That's rolled up into a hierarchy, so you start top down. So this really made our life extremely simple. We don't even need tagging. If you get this under control, the reporting becomes much easier. Let's take an example of Kubernetes implementation. Let's say there are two accounts. One account has your infrastructure security networking hub, and the other account has your two clusters. Out of the box, Kubernetes labels really well. Through Prometheus, you can suck in all those labels. Let's say this cluster has a name. You don't need to tag because you already know that cluster name is for that particular application. Likewise, each node, or you have node groups, you don't need to tag because it already is available. Let's take the last one, which is environment. There are, in this hypothetical example, there are 5 pods. We know the cost of that node. Let's say it's a AWS R5.x large instance. Its usable memory is 256, but we can really deploy 249 gig of workloads. We can allocate the cost down to each pod based on the request that the pod has made to the control plane. So we do the cost allocation direct, as I just mentioned, for all the pods and containers, all the stateful set also. But we borrowed this cost allocation from manufacturing. Manufacturing has been doing standard costing, cost allocation, ever since manufacturing has been existing, right? So this is not new. Maybe it's new to FinOps and public cloud. So in manufacturing world, there is a concept called burden or overhead, like your HQ. It's not allocated to the product. It's just kept centrally. So we don't charge that. It's all those kinds of services which are central. Those are kept centrally, and they're optimized centrally. But there is something in between, right? So the analogy that I was talking to you about, right? Let's say office space cost allocation. So you can allocate the cost of the space and say, okay, whatever number of seats, who's occupying, I can do that. But you also have toilets in the office, and you have kitchen. You can track, okay, you use a toilet for 5 minutes and allocate the cost. But is it really going to move the needle? So you need to be really careful, and we were extremely deliberate what cost to allocate and what not to allocate. Standard cost, I mentioned about this. So what we do is we hold the unit price of that all the SKUs that we use constant at the start of the year. So that the horizontal line, let's say, is the SKU price for the entire 365 days. And the dotted line are the variability that will happen through the year. Now, FinOps team is held accountable to get the actual cost, and the bonus you talked about, get the cost actual lower than that, and then you can earn the bonus, right? So yeah, that really helps. Then you P times Q based on your usage. If your usage is the same, you'll just have flat cost dollar. That's really helped us really achieve this. We got the next aspect, which is our rhythm of business, as we call it, or your governance aspect. We do long-range plan twice a year because cloud is so fast changing, new projects, optimization. In fact, we just concluded, as you know, our long-range plan. But we do meet with all the leaders every month. That's where we look at the forecast, the variance, what happened, root cause analysis, blameless reviews. That has really helped us get the accuracy to the high level that I mentioned. And the way we implemented our forecast module is really the key. So at the heart of it is this concept called your plan series. Let's assume we are in the month of June. We are in plan series V6. So we have actuals up to May month, and we are going to do forecast rolling 12 months, June onwards. Let's say we had called the forecast for August $123,000. Fast forward 3 months, we are now in V9. We have actuals up to, clicker, if it works. We are in September month, right, V9, 9th month. We have actuals up to August, and we can see the actual in that V9 was 138, and now versus the forecast of 123. So we have goals for each leader, 3-month forecast accuracy of plus or minus 3%, and 6-month accuracy plus or minus 5%. And this tooling has really helped us. So what we do is through Opus, which has all the detailed transaction level detail, we pull all of that at a day level aggregate, put it into our planning module, and that triggers for all our hundreds of forecast owners to submit their forecast. And Each one of them have detailed forecast models, which are driver-based, based on which SKU are you going to use, how many customers are you going to onboard in one particular region, how are you going to optimize. All of that is fed back into the tool, and then we create all this and retain all this, persist all this 12 plan series, 2 long-range plan series, and 1 budget series. And we also have the BigQuery ML model, which predicts what the forecast is going to be, or what it thinks it will likely end that month with. That's compared with the forecast that is submitted, and it gives an anomaly alert to the team via our Opus dashboard. So this is all made that all the governance life much easier. So with that, I'll hand it over to Don to talk us through the architecture of Opus.
So, Dinesh, do you know what it reminded me of when you reached out to me way back when to say, we wanted to build out a new platform for Workday for FinOps?
You're talking about hair? Or something naughty, I guess? Nothing
No,
naughty?
nothing naughty. I'm still trying to get that bonus out of you after all. But it reminded me of this commercial back in the 90s where Cy Sperling would come on at the end of the commercial and hold up a little picture of himself and say, I'm not just the president, but I'm also a client for Hair Club for Men. That's because we're now entering this territory of practicing what we preach. Right? And this is for you folks in the audience. We might be the creators of this new cost governance framework for FinOps, but that means we're also a service owner. So every month, Dinesh has me sit down with a member of the core FinOps team, and I go through a cost breakdown analysis, and I talk about the customized allocation methodology that we use to break down the Opus cost to the individual users who are using this internal platform. Go through budget and forecasting out the 12-month estimates. And then I walk away from those meetings with action items for cost savings opportunities and action items. So even though I'm part of this FinOps family, it's like working for your dad, right? But what this does do is it gives you a unique vantage point, because while we're trying to onboard other applications team onto the FinOps platform, we understand some of the pain points that they're going through because, well, we've done it. And so we're leading by example in many cases, but it's still a challenge to onboard applications team onto a FinOps platform because, let's face it, you're still asking them to do some work. So a technique that we're doing is we are leveraging technologies that allow these application teams to continue to use their existing data solutions. Now, these data solutions can be observability solutions that they're using for performance monitoring, measuring resource utilization, or measuring transaction volumes, or even going through user auditing or environment configuration details. The point is, or the key here, is to standardize on metadata. That's because if we standardize on metadata, we can standardize on things like resource identifiers, both from the operational data sets as well as the financial data sets that are coming in from the cloud service providers. And if we do this, then we can have tailored analytics for each of these subject areas to give you a breakdown on maybe cost per customer or cost per transaction, or if you're an internal service organization like Opus, cost per user. Now, how do we do this? Let me talk about 3 main open source technologies that are powering Opus. The first of which is Trino. So Trino is our unified query engine, and it enables us to connect to multiple databases that are spread across multiple accounts and platforms. Now, this is and once we query off of these, we can query off of them using one single query language. Now, the databases that you see attached here are not physically part of the FinOps data lake per se. Instead, they all are operating under the owners of those databases, and so the data remains in place. We don't have to duplicate any of the data in order to integrate these data sets together. Moving over to the middle section of the slide is dbt. So dbt is the industry standard for doing data transformations. But for us, it's a bit more than that because it enables us to have multiple teams developing onto our common data platform simultaneously, as it has a good platform for doing workflow governance and a mechanism for doing role and access controls on individual models. So that's a perfect platform for us to implement our data governance solution. The last open source technology is Lightdash. So Lightdash is an open source equivalent of Google Looker, and it integrates seamlessly into dbt, allowing us to have that governance in place, but then also allowing for self-service analytics. It has advanced visualization capabilities and collaboration capabilities that's integrated into Slack and email. So that's what we're using to send out alerts to various account owners when they're exceeding certain thresholds.
And one thing that probably some of you might have noticed on the dashboard demos that we gave, they were all bar charts or some lines. There were no pies or donuts. So if you do a Google search, leave the pies for dessert, we will see why there are no pie charts in any of our dashboard visualization.
Dinesh doesn't like pie charts. I learned that early on. On the next slide, we'll go into the data composition that's encompassing Opus. First, we have our core FinOps data that comprises our CSP billing, our forecasting, our CSP discounts. Now, this for Workday ranges into the hundreds of gigabytes per month, but it has a very broad impact as it's integrated into almost every other data set within Opus. Now, this is in stark contrast to our operations data. Here, they have a relatively localized impact for each subject area. However, the data volume for our operations data is massive. We're talking about hundreds of terabytes per month and petabytes in total. Now, this was a key consideration that we had to take into account when we were deciding on where we were going to deploy the Opus platform, because we wanted to make sure that we were avoiding massive data transfer fees when we're integrating these data sets together. So we stored this close to the data gravity, and we're using regional services where possible to avoid those fees.
Yeah, that's a very important point, because we learned we had one implementation we had to scratch, because we wanted to be co-located where the data is. That unit metrics is a big lofty word. It basically is a numerator and a denominator. Right? So to get the denominator, which is your enterprise data, that's where you need the tiny data set of cost, which is your numerator, to reside. Otherwise, you're pumping petabytes worth of data into the other side and just incurring too much. So we eat our own dog food. So he's got a KPI to have the Opus cost as low as possible. And you saw all the open source technology, which makes us be as lean and practice what we preach.
Yeah, that's right, that's right. Now, there are three other data sources that comprise Opus, the standard metadata that we covered in the previous slide, but then there's also third-party APIs, because not everything can be integrated, or not everything is a database that can be integrated into Trino. And then last, we have our documentation that helps point users into the right content. Now, one of the goals of Opus is to democratize data, FinOps data to all of our workmates. But we want to be very intentional on how we give out this access. It's kind of like the Prime Directive from Star Trek. Any Star Trek fans out there? Okay. For those of you who are not a Star Trek fan, you're missing out. But also, here's what the Prime Directive's goal is. We want to protect unprepared civilizations from the dangers of introducing them to new advanced technology and knowledge before they're ready for it. That's why we introduce most of our new FinOps users to standard cost. But with that said, let's go back to our FinOps platform access. At the base of the pyramid, we have our data integrators. These are our gatekeepers into Trino. They're responsible for bringing in the new data sets, but then also curating that data sets to be accessed by the business intelligence layer. Advancing up the pyramid, we have those dashboard publishers. These are subject matter experts that are taking those curated data sets, and they're responsible for producing quality charts and dashboards that are going to be used by the masses. And finally, we have the consumers. The consumers are using data, using charts and dashboards that are produced by others, But what's unique about Opus is that these consumers still have the ability to do advanced analytics. They can do filters and drill downs and create their own charts. However, they cannot publish any of the charts that they produce. They have to work with one of the subject matter experts who has dashboard publishing access. And this is our way of maintaining good data hygiene within the environment while still allowing for self-service.
Yeah, and it also helps avoid the database or dashboard sprawl, because that's what one lesson we learned, that if you allow everybody to create the dashboard, it's just a slight tweak to the existing dashboard, and then your overall user stats are lower, and people are just making their own forked dashboard with a different data definition.
That's right. And then it becomes very hard to figure out what the authoritative source of truth is and which dashboard should I be looking at. So as we wrap up, this is the full tech stack of Opus. So we're using open source, and then we're also using commercial software. On the left-hand side, you see the open source core technologies. And we're using this primarily to, one, obviously reduce licensing costs, but then two, the customization functionality that this provides. But then we're also still using commercial software where it makes sense to do so. So for example, we're using Slack all throughout Workday, so it made sense to use that for our communications and alerting for our anomalies. We're using Google Sheets for, not for big data analytics, but we're using it for data input for forecasting, and then BigQuery ML, as it has a lot of ML capabilities out of the box, and we're not sending massive data sets over to BigQuery, so the cost is relatively small. Now, Apache Airflow is open source. However, we're using the cloud service provider managed instance of Apache Airflow because our use case for it is simple and it's inexpensive. So that's a good segue into our lessons learned section here. Conduct an ROI analysis before you're building out your own tool. Just because open source exists doesn't mean you should use it. It'd be great if you're using that to reduce your licensing costs, but take into account the cost of managing open source, because there is a technical skill that's required for maintaining the thing. Take a look at your existing talent pool within your organization or even across your company.
Sure. Excellent. Yeah, to the point of open source, if you are an engineering team, then you can work with the open source. What we found was with open source, you can submit your code upstream, and it gets hardened. So you can contribute, you can customize the tool. If you buy a third-party CSP technology, it's very difficult to influence their roadmap because we are one among the many customers that they have. So we really liked open source approach, but depends on how large is your engineering team that Don talked about. Before jumping into building this tool, be it open source or proprietary licensed product, getting the right talent who knows what to do was big learning. Establishing the processes, the ROB, getting people used to looking at their forecast and variances and all of that. And then tool becomes an enabler rather than the end goal. Standard cost was a big blessing for us. It's removed so much of noise from our FinOps team. It's just so intuitive for people to see, yeah, I used an AMD instance, I can see my cost go down. And it's just so intuitive. Cost allocation also, we were very deliberate. If the cost that I'm going to allocate, if it is going to be less than 1%, 2%, it's not going to make any difference to the underlying data analytics. Why unnecessarily make it too complicated to allocate every single dollar? So we hold them centrally, like the elevator in the office building, and optimize the algorithms such that it is used effectively, rather than allocating that, peanut buttering it to everybody else.
Deploy your platform close to the data gravity. Maybe you have a tool that you like, but it only resides into one cloud service provider, but most of your data resides on some other platform. You don't want to be blindsided by unexpected data transfer fees, and use regional services where possible.
Right architecture that can scale. The third-party software tool, especially for Kubernetes that we use, could not scale to our scale. So the architecture that you design should not be for the current needs, but for the future. It was a big learning for us.
And plan for scale. Don't become the bottleneck for your company and having other teams on board onto the FinOps platform. Allow multiple teams to be developing onto the platform simultaneously.
Data governance. All this machine learning, Gen AI, talk about in the industry everywhere. At the heart of it is the data needs to be well organized to draw inferences from that. So for us, data governance and the pyramid that Don showed, having those roles which curate the data so that you don't have pollution of the data is really crucial that we learn. Dimensions across CSPs so that you can conform and not be siloed in looking at one CSP cost and separate CSP costs. Every element, if your databases are multi-AZ, you should ask the other service provider to also provide that data. So that's probably in my view, the next Focus 3.0 requirement. Focus 1.0 gets us up to here, but our needs were much broader for us to save costs. We had to build something completely of our own.
So our FinOps journey is continuously evolving. You saw that we started off our journey using packaged software and managed solutions, and then we since grow to require more tailored solutions in order to meet Workday's business needs. We know that AI and ML are continuing to evolve in this space, but we're going to continue to improve the user experience, either by using AI or by developing more intuitive Slack action-based integrations, or by integrating a more seamless data catalog solution. So our FinOps platform is going to continue to evolve and improve, and so is our practice. And with that, be happy to take any questions.
Excellent. Big round of applause, guys. Give them a nice big round of applause. That was very good.
Thank you.
Who wants to kick us off? All right. Easy.
Thank you for the great presentation. Congratulations on your journey. So I was intrigued by the standard thing that you mentioned there about unit cost, about the numerator and denominator, how you're thinking about it. I was intrigued by what you said on customer. So did you also standardize the size of the customer? Because I'm assuming the cost per customer, the size of the customers will also significantly vary, size of based on what they're using. Let's say you are in Workday, like recruiting versus payroll and stuff like that, right? So all that would vary. So how do you think about those different dimensions of the product or the size of the customer?
Yeah, so the cost of public cloud is standardized, right? So the delta between the actual cost, because you can't hide away from actual just because you got a standard cost. So every month we have to absorb the variance. If anybody has done cost accounting for manufacturing, these concepts are well known for almost hundreds of years. So the delta, it's more of a financial engineering part, not so much our go-to-market impact, right? So let's say my cost for an R5.X large instance internally will say 6 cents per hour. Actuals could be 5.9 cents for 1 hour. Based on the RI coverage, it could have been 6.5. At the end of the month, all that delta should be tiny so that your absorption is not too high.
Cool. Thank you so much for your presentation. And also congrats to accomplishing this. Building our own tool, also knowing what is behind it is a lot. And my question was, because we were talking about the account segmentation, was it a decision you were driving? Because, I mean, it's a lot also accompanied by security decisions and whatnot. Is that something that you drove initially? So saying you want to have that big isolation zones or part of segmentations within your cloud? Or?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we are an HR software company, PII, we hold PII data. So as a result, security is just everywhere in the company. You can't even breathe without talking about security. So the mandate of many small accounts are not polluting one account, having multiple different types. So the account, the organization structure, the folder structure, they inherit the policies and the stringent. So tier 0 will be only in these accounts. So every new project request, there is a friction. It's not like an engineer can create a new account just by themselves through a console. It goes through this rigor to say, does it require what we call as TSR, a security review, because you might be using some data which could be dangerous. And in that friction and that workflow, is also FinOps to say, what are you using an R&D? Is this account for R&D or is it for a demo, sales demo? So that tagging of, or not tagging, it's a cost center assignment in the metadata gets done upfront. So it is not after the fact that the account has got created and then we are chasing everybody to see what type of workloads are there in that.
All right, who's got our next question for Don and Dinesh?
Thanks. Just to follow up on that question, so if you have, it's going to be an R&D account, and you obviously have a lot of InfoSec, cyber security limitations, but do you also apply limitations that are specific to FinOps in terms of costing? Do they make sure, do you put limitations such as this account cannot create an 8XL instance type, or things like that across the organization, or you kind of look at it retroactively and as a quick response using your Opus tool?
Yeah, the governance is only the type of workload, not what instances they can use. So they can use the most expensive instance, but that's where our anomaly alerts come in to say, I did not see this, are you really sure? And then, so we want to integrate with Slack. As of now, it's just one of the hub and spoke model that we talked about. So the spoke for that particular subject area will go and work with the DevOps team to say, I see this spike in usage. Is this really intentional? And then we look at the usage. If it's a Kubernetes workload, then our dashboards automatically show your request was 2 gig, but you're really using 15 MB. You are oversized. Get your request correct. Yeah, but there's no constraint on the agility for developer. It's just at the upfront whether you can open an account or not, because they're trying out new things. So we don't hold them to say you can't use Lambda functions or you can't use this. There are no restrictions after that.
I'm just curious about your pyramid of different user types having different kinds of access. Did you find that the users required a lot of training to kind of get the hang of the level of access that they had as far as creating dashboards or creating their own queries, or was the tooling pretty intuitive? Did people kind of get it pretty quickly?
Yeah, I suppose that's a bit subjective, but Lightdash is an open source equivalent of Google Looker, and so we were using Google Looker, and we introduced Lightdash, and so it was a pretty natural transition for a lot of our users. But then also those who are just coming in fresh did find it relatively intuitive. We do have training material, but the training section is relatively small because there's just not so many options that, let's say, consumers have to be able to create their own dashboards. It's pretty curated. They still have a lot of features that they can drill into, but there's not so much that they can do that really allows them to shoot themselves in the foot.
Thanks. I appreciate the talk. 2 questions. One, how big was the size of the team that put this together and operates it? And the second question is, why do you hide your CSP discounts from your consumers?
Maybe I'll take the second one. The first one, I need to think whether I can tell this in the recorded video. But the second one was, why did we hide the discounts? Yeah, because we are multi-cloud. And in this world, there is no secret. So when you're negotiating with one CSP, how much cross-service discounts or PPA you got, you don't want to reveal your hand, right? So those are really confidential data point from my perspective, and it helped us when we just signed a contract a few months ago. We don't want to reveal that ever. Now, how large is the team? So there is a FinOps functional team. It's just not pure FinOps. They are BI oriented, let's say, who understands, how the star schema is and how should you think about. So they are really product managers with strong, let's say 80% on FinOps domain, but they are also 20-25% on how BI systems work, and we hired that kind of talent. Engineering talent, they have petabyte size worth of data experience, managing our observability, our stats warehouse, as we call it. So it was a combination. So the reason we were successful in a way because of that experience and that intersection of experience of not only FinOps but BI to give really crisp product requirements to the engineering team so that they can go and build that.
All right, who's next?
Looks like that's it.
I think we might be all set. Thank you guys so
Thank
much.
you.
Let's have another
Thank you.
round of applause for Don and Dinesh from Workday. Thank you, guys.
Thanks for watching. Check out more FinOps X 2024 content on our YouTube channel on the 2024 playlist. Support our channel by liking, subscribing, clicking the notification bell, and by leaving comments and questions for our speakers. We appreciate your support.